that when I came on the county board, the caliber of the staff members that are on the board and the department heads are very good people, and so we need to, we lose our focus being a 19-member board as to what exactly the position of a board is. A board is there to set a policy and make sure that policy is maintained, not necessarily carry out every last little detail of that policy. I assimilated to when I ran my own business. If I needed to be on a job site every day directing every last detail, then why am I paying a foreman on that job? I might as well do it myself, or if I am doing it myself. The county board has to look at that same issue, and so we need to step back when we consider the size and the number of people, and whether it's a full-time or part-time. We have to rely on the staff we have. If we're going to have this infrastructure of department heads and their assistants and the board staff that we have to be able to utilize the people that we have in place.
And not to usurp my own authority here, but just to help you out also with that question. If you look at the county budget pie chart, about a $1.3 billion county budget, 45% of that is health and human services. That's a function that municipal governments don't do. 20% is transportation and public works. There is a little bit of overlap there. The county takes care of the county trunk highways. The county, on behalf of the state, maintains and plows state highways, and of course transit is a big part of that municipalities don't do. After that, we have public safety, mainly the sheriff, but really it's the jail and the house of corrections. So a corrections detention piece that municipal governments don't do. Other significant pieces are parks, recreation, and culture. That's about 6% of the budget, and courts and judiciary is about 5%. So those are some of the major areas of content. Okay, yes, sir.
My name is Gerald Glazer. I live in the city of Milwaukee, and I have been a candidate for the county board, but I got the short end partly because of the board members doing their own districting. First of all, I'd like to say that to Supervisor Sanfilippo, I think that your rationale for reducing the number to 15 was the best I've ever heard for why a particular number should be chosen as opposed to any other number. I totally agree with you on that. However, when you look at your proposed redistricting maps, that some of the same criticism that I would have of the county board's approved map are also true of yours. For example, your 15 member chart, you've got District 4 completely surrounds District 12. It's like it goes all the way around from the east side to the west side. You've got other districts. You've got West Alloy, keeping cities and villages united. And people talk about how Whitefish Bay should be a single district.
Glazer, please ask your question.
Okay, why do you divide West Dallas into 2 districts? Why do you propose that some districts wrap around other districts instead of having straight, clear lines?
Thank you. The districts, on my 15-district plan, what I did was I followed existing ward lines in municipalities to try to make the redistricting process for each municipality easier instead of coming up with radically different lines than what we have right now. So if you take a look at my 15-district plan, it is pretty close, other than being 4 districts less than our current plan, it's pretty close to our 19-district plan right now. Our current 19-district plan, for example, has West Dallas divided into 3 supervisory districts. So that division does take place. The difference between West Dallas, Whitefish Bay, you have a different population number, but you also have a different diversity of people too. So you can't, to get different representation isn't always a bad thing, and it's not always possible to keep each municipality within its own district.
Jerry Tepper from Glendale. One of the concerns I have, our city, that's why I can empathize with Whitefish Bay, our city has historically been represented by 2 or 3 different county supervisors. We like the idea of our city being represented by 1. We're happy with 1 out of 18 instead of 2 out of 18. Because that makes it easier for us. How can the county board redraw their lines so that each of our communities is within, the whole community is within a supervisory district as it used to be?
think, you know, with the rules and regulations we have to follow under the Voting Rights Act, that can tend to be very difficult. So without having the exact census breakdown of Glendale, for example, it's hard for me to answer that question. But I think what you want to do is try to get as much diversity into a community as possible. And you also have to comply with the Voting Rights Act that tells us we need to have a certain number of districts for minority-majority representation. And so that dictates a lot of where those lines are going to go.
Yes, sir.
Since the person that speaks for us is on the hit list, who do we squawk to try to get this undone? Since the other people that are represent others, you know, they're going to listen to them and not to us. How do we get this unwound?
Well, you know, it's the old-fashioned thing. Get organized. Start contacting your elected officials. Start a campaign. Keep price. You know, let them know. But you got to start mounting an offensive, or they're just going to walk all over you.
Yeah, but they want him killed, so.
That's what I'm saying. Is you got to get the community motivated. You got a lot of people here who come of interest. You start a campaign. You know, a good slogan: keep price. You know, and start doing a lot of stuff. Going door to door, encouraging people to call the county board, calling other elected officials to get more support. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done. You know, we've just got to get motivated.
Well, that's why we're here, but who do we contact?
Yeah.
Listen.
My understanding is that the newly elected county executive still has the ability of vetoing the current plan. And so, well, the county executive at the ICC meeting actually expressed opposition to the current plan. So calls to the county executive to get him and to urge him to veto that plan would put it all back right on the drawing board, and then you would have total input. That's the simplest. This gentleman to my right said that the city of Milwaukee has had redistricting software available to all of the people in the city of Milwaukee. That's true. And the mayor of the city of Milwaukee, as well as other county supervisors, have offered the ICC the ability of that software so that we could redistrict the plan. Personally, I'd like to see a plan come from the people itself, the people throughout all of Milwaukee County. But the simplest way is to call County Executive Abley right now.
Thank you.
If I could just further comment, I think an approach on this would be to identify that every county board member that votes for this punitive and vindictive plan, that will be an issue in their reelection in April of 2012. All 18, 15, whatever. If you want to get to them, they want to preserve their jobs. They'll start thinking about doing what's right.
We're going to go to this gentleman, then that woman, then that woman. Okay, so you guys decide. Steve, so we'll get you. Your turn.
You know, this to me, you know, as an outsider looking in, I'm a lifelong county resident. I live in the village of Bayside. I'm a property owner in the city of Milwaukee. We have a corrupt leader running the county board. He controls the county board. Everybody does what he wants them to do. So how do little guys like us fight that? How do we fight that? We don't vote in Lee Holloway's district. He didn't even have the stones to show up tonight. So I'm curious, how do we fight that? Am I the only one that reads the paper? He's corrupt, and today, part of the roof fell on a poor lady. So, but he's still operating.
Any of our panelists have any response?
I don't get it.
I mean, one thing is showing up to this. You know, there were, I think, 3 or 4 county redistricting hearings. I was at one of them, and there were maybe a dozen people there. That's when they were making the decision, really. You got to get more involved and show up to events like this. Because there's a nice crowd here, I would expect that there will be some media coverage, which will put pressure on someone like Holloway.
Don't count on it. Don't count.
Look, the bottom line is that from day day one, the NAACP wanted people to get involved in this process. That's why we yapped at our mouth early on to try and get some media coverage for this so that people were paying attention to it instead of not having anybody at these hearings. And just one point I want to make is just this this process is so cynical. You know, San Filippo and Rice can stand up and talk about how great they are and fair, but if they were in the majority, they would probably do something that's politically suspect as well. It's an inherently cynical process.
We're the ones that
Okay.
So maybe we should get rid of the county board
Sir,
completely
I
and
promised,
just have independent
I promised that
citizens.
woman she'd go next. Yes, ma'am.
Two questions. One is, what I understood by ably not vetoing a bill or an agenda, or not even commenting on it, is a tacit acceptance of it. And then the other question is in regards to prior meetings. This is the first time I've heard of any meeting going in regards to districting. So, and from what I've understood now, just talking with Ann here, is that most of them were either during the day when people are unavailable and at work, or in the evenings when at a time where people were a little too afraid to get out. So why is it so that it's so difficult to hear about this without having to constantly monitor websites, other than just having something in the newspaper that's more public, they're, more towards the front page that people are more likely to read versus buried in the back.
I'm not sure that any of our panelists can answer that.
Well, for your first question, I was disappointed that the county executive didn't veto the plan the first time around either. But I think we have to remember this plan came to him, I think within less than 10 days of him being sworn in and taking over the job. So I think we have to cut him in that regard a little slack, because he was just thrown right into the fire. I think, truthfully, that he's had a chance to look at it now. He did say at the ICC meeting, he expressed opposition to the plan. So I think that as he hears more from people in the county that they're not happy with the process that they took place, I think he will take that into consideration. So I wouldn't necessarily read his lack of vetoing it as tacit approval. Your second question, and you're entirely right. When the first redistricting public meeting was held, it was held in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, and that wasn't a good idea. I sent an email asking the chairman of the redistricting committee to consider having a meeting in the evening time when it was more convenient for people to come. He did that, but unfortunately he chose 5 o'clock on a Friday night. So we didn't get a good response at that time either. Now the flip side of that is, though, people do have to get involved, and unfortunately, we see people want to get involved when things are down to the point where there is a catastrophe. And I, for example, I sent an email to all of the people on my newsletter list saying, here's the public hearings, it's important for you to show up, and I explain why. And I have to tell you, nobody from my district showed up to the meeting. So a lot of times it's a lack of motivation for people not wanting to get involved. And before I went into political life, and I was running my own business, so I was way too busy to even do a whole lot of extra things. But I was always writing letters to my representatives from everybody from the school board right on up to the federal level. And believe me, those work. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. It is more than just a saying. Your elected officials need to hear from you in order to get something done. And so, there's an old expression that people get the government they deserve. Well, it's like anything else. If you don't put a lot of effort into staying on top of your elected officials, then things